2 years ago, Article 370 was revoked by Bharatiya Janata Party government. On this issue, I am joined by Ram Madhav, the man who put in place the first BJP government in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, who is now the member of the National Executive of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and also a member of the Board of Governors of the India Foundation. So thank you for giving time to TV9 Digital, and let me begin this interview by asking you, in terms of tangible success, what has been achieved in J&K?
Since you referred to that government that we formed in Jammu and Kashmir 5 years ago in 2015, let me start with one of my experiences around the time that we were forming the government, which has great relevance to what we are discussing. When I had an occasion to talk to a very senior leader of the PDP in the process of finalizing our deal. I told the leader that, look, Prime Minister Modi is very keen on bringing a lot of development to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. So we two going together forming the government will be beneficial. The reply I got was very surprising. The reply was that, look, about development, every government in Delhi used to say the same thing. You are also saying the same thing. There is nothing so special about it. What we want you to recognize was the fact that in 1947, we, the Sheikh Sahab, that is was Sheikh Abdullah, and the people of Kashmir had a choice. We were a Muslim majority state. Our decision to join the Indian Union in 1947 must be seen as a great concession that people of Kashmir had given to India. In other words, 370 was a grateful gesture of Indian government for the great concessions that we as people of Kashmir have given. I used to wonder that if not development, what was the politics in Jammu and Kashmir all about for these political leaders? That day I realized it was this exceptionalism. India should be perpetually grateful to us because we had an option, but we joined India. 370 represented that exceptionalism. What the annulment of 370 2 years ago did was to put an end to that exceptionalism. Okay, 2 years have passed. After 2 years, I was there last week for a program. We had a conference there. We had a number of different stakeholders from the Kashmir politics present in that conference. Not a single one of them had talked about revocation of Article 370. Same was the experience when Prime Minister called that meeting 2 weeks ago in Delhi. So today, 2 years down the line, one major achievement is, okay, now people and leaders, everybody realize that the so-called special status is not going to come back. So we are like any other citizen of the country. That realization has dawned on the entire political spectrum definitely, and majority of the people of the state. I consider it as one of the significant achievements. But having said it, government has done a lot of good work in last 2 years to take development to the doorstep of the people. J&K Bank is freely disbursing loans to the people. Very interestingly, while we had very bad impact of COVID on our economy, Jammu and Kashmir is still doing relatively better in the sense that their unemployment rates have come down by half. I mean, it was about 19% in 2019-20, and today it's hardly 10%. So things are definitely improving. On law and order front, terrorist incidents, suddenly, you are all reporting nowadays about almost every alternate day some incident happening and all that. But even today, if you look at the overall levels of terrorism in the valley, it's much lower than what it was before 2019. And all these things indicate to a fact that the mood in the Kashmir valley especially, which was always the challenge for the Indian state, it has now changed from that sense of exceptionalism and a sort of ladlapan. You should treat us like a pampered child. From there to, all right, we are also a part and parcel of the rest of the country. That shift has definitely there is a palpable sense of the shift in the valley. I think it's a great achievement for Government of India.
Do you feel that the politics of exceptionalism created ripe ground for integration, or you feel that this politics of exceptionalism was used to perpetuate certain political interests and dynasties in the valley?
Obviously, that sense of exceptionalism was exploited by certain forces, especially Pakistan and other forces within the state. A major big infrastructure of separatism and terrorism was built over decades in the valley. It was fed by the sense of exceptionalism, which was continuously, harped on by the valley leadership, the so-called mainstream valley leadership, which survived only on that sentiment. All that they used to sell to the people was we are different from the rest of India. This exceptionalism, this has led to all that infrastructure. Now, once that edifice has been demolished, that so-called sense of exceptionalism has been removed. Today, people now they are raising. There is a sense of grievance. I don't deny that in the valley. People, a section of the populace is annoyed, but not annoyed for Article 370, but more annoyed that they have been overnight converted into a union territory. They were a state, and statehood has been deprived of them. So this sense of feeling that we should be treated as a state, which is a very valid grievance in any democracy.
That's a very important point you have made, because perhaps J&K is the only place in this country which got demoted from a state to union territories. So was it necessary? That's a corollary question. Was it necessary?
Certain specific situations call for specific remedies. It was the decision to make an two UTs out of the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir state was probably needed at that time when we were effecting that major constitutional shift in the status of the state. Now, the residual J&K, which was created into a union territory, is today demanding a statehood. For that matter, the Joint Action Committee in Ladakh today, one of the demands is also for statehood. But you must remember that these are all legitimate demands. Whether you give statehood today or not is different. But if a person in a state feels that his statehood should be restored or given back, one should take it in right spirit. It is a political demand.
In your opinion, what did UTs achieve? Because it's been 2 years. What did they achieve in terms of administration, or what did they achieve in terms of delivery from your point of view?
As far as J&K UT is concerned, definitely we have been able to cover a lot of ground in last 2 years. See, pandemic has not allowed any government, forget about this UT administration, any state government in the country to function to its full capacity. In spite of that, today, as I mentioned, they have been able to bring down unemployment levels. They are working very hard to encourage, self-employment by way of giving loans to people. The LG told us that 50,000 people in Jammu and Kashmir are going to be the beneficiaries of these loans up to 1 million and 10 lakh rupees. They have handled COVID very well. Do you know that Jammu and Kashmir today can proudly claim giving jobs to vaccination to 60% of the eligible population, which many bigger states could not achieve. They have been able to achieve. So in very difficult situation also, they are working hard to bring development to the state. One very big achievement that they have been able to register in last 2 years was, you remember we started the process of taking democracy to the grassroots by conducting panchayat elections. That happened before the annulment of Article 370 in 2018 itself. But the major thing that happened in last 2 years, especially under Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha in the last 1 year, was to delegate to the lower units funds, functions and functionary. Where Panchayati Raj system suffered in the entire country was, although you conduct elections, create a body, but you neither give them powers nor give them money. Whereas in Jammu and Kashmir today, the LG is ensuring that these lower units are getting funds, functions, they have their rights, duties, functionaries, they are getting officers or employees required. That is actually encouraging grassroots democracy. And today, the traditional ruling class is that's why very happy, very unhappy. They say that, this LG is depriving us of our authority because he is creating authority at the grassroots. But it is good for Jammu and Kashmir, good for democracy. That kind of new democratic, transformation is taking place in the valley, and that is making grassroots people very happy.
There used to be a time when a lot of chief ministers and senior politicians in J&K would say normalcy needs to be restored, and for normalcy, certain things needs to be done. Certain other non-Indian players need to be involved. When we say normalcy needs to be restored, do you think that in 2 years of time there is a new normalcy, or the situation remains the same?
Look, that's why I said, when those mainstream valley leaders, so-called mainstream, valley mainstream, they call themselves, when they used to talk about normalcy, they always used to keep India and Pakistan on the same footing, as though Kashmir is a joint obligation. We always insisted that no, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. So that whole narrative that only if India and Pakistan talk, then only Kashmir's normalcy will be restored, has no takers anymore, even in Kashmir today. It's another matter. I'm not saying that India and Kashmir should or should not talk. That's a decision that Delhi will take, irrespective of what happens in Srinagar or Jammu. So the narrative about this exceptionalism, which always involved Pakistan as a stakeholder, or for that matter, the separatists as a stakeholder, has today lost its relevance. Ordinary Kashmiri is no longer interested in that narrative.
Who was the politician who spoke to you about exceptionalism? That is making me really curious now.
No, names are not important, but normally, naturally, if you just rewind your own memories, you would come to those leaders who used to always say that Kashmir is special. Our integration was not like any other Indian state, any other princely state. We were separate. We were different. It was a conditional accession. That was the mindset.
So, you have been talking about grassroots democracy, but there was a special exercise which you also took to create a new political class, or if I may use the word, to allow leaders from non-political backgrounds to come and take up public offices and become part of the political life. What has happened to that, if I may use the word experiment, or if I may use the word push from BJP? Because nothing has yielded on ground as of now in terms of someone coming up and say, well, I am the third front, or I am the fourth phase, this is my party. Because ultimately that bipolarity or tripolarity or four-polarity in terms of BJP, Abdullahs, Muftis and Congress, it remains.
No, first of all, we in Delhi should not promote this whole theory that whoever stands up in Kashmir talking about Constitution of India, respecting it, is immediately someone created by Delhi. The whole concept that anybody who talks about India is King's party or the Delhi agent, this is actually a myth created by Delhi itself. We should desist from it. As I said today, especially in Kashmir Valley, Jammu has always been with India, its period. There is no issue. There was never an issue. But in Kashmir Valley, today, there are a number of outfits which are rising with the demands like, on one hand, day-to-day issues. For example, they want development. They also don't want to see too much of militarization of the region. They want less militarized Kashmir. They want peace. And more importantly, they want constitutional status like statehood. They don't want UT. So with these demands, if local leadership rises, there is no reason to think that Delhi has promoted them. They failed. It's not the case. They themselves have risen. They are appealing to a new constituency and they are getting traction gradually. They are mainstream parties. Congress is there, BJP is there. Apart from this, these new parties are rising. It is time, I'm saying this with a lot of responsibility, it is time those parties, the issues that those parties are raising are given more importance than the traditional parties which always have a treacherous approach when it comes to national issues of national integrity and all. From the back door, they will still talk about that exceptionalism. They will say something about no, we are still waiting for the Supreme Court, this, that. So we better expect these new forces to rise. I, as an individual, see the culmination of the abrogation of nullification of Article 370 in a day when the power goes into the hands of these forces, the new leadership, and the state sees less of external involvement. Let the state run its affairs on its own. For example, Jammu and Kashmir police is today a strong and very mature police, very capable police, is come of age. They can handle the situation in the state. So how do we allow them to run the security affairs of the state? These are the issues that will take us to the logical culmination.
Are you saying that centre needs to have slightly more thick skin and accommodative of multiple voices on constitutional issues?
Look, the dominant voices in the state are today about, statehood.
Yes.
About elections.
Yes.
Why elections means, okay, like, if Uttar Pradesh is ruled by people in Uttar Pradesh, why not Kashmir ruled by people in Jammu and Kashmir?
But there are no elections happening there now.
That means you have to hold elections. These are the kind of demands. These are all constitutional demands. Okay, government has said, Home Minister has said that statehood will be restored at an appropriate time. It's actually not restoration. It's actually giving statehood to the residual part of Jammu and Kashmir. So probably in that direction, government will make the moves which is good for the state.
But what about the elections? Don't you think that they should have been held by now?
See, the constitutional amendment contained that one clause of delimitation. So once the delimitation process is completed, then election can take place, because the number of seats has been increased from 83 to 90, plus 24 seats in POJK. So that delimitation exercise is on. Once that exercise is complete, I think elections will be held.
Tell me one thing, generally when we speak about Kashmir, it's always in context of national security, or now it's context of 370, or it's in context of China, the sort of changes which are taking place in Afghanistan. And I'll ask that question to you. But there is also one thing which is palpable, which is that liberal sentiment of 60s, or the sort of films being shot there like Kashmir Ki Kadi, Shammi Kapoor, Sharmila Tagore, which a lot of Indians remember. It seems to have been lost in the decades of 80s and 90s. You have a very visible conservative element in Kashmir, which has somehow moved away from the Sufi elements of the society to somehow very fundamentalist Islamic orientation. How does one deal with it? Imagine you have a state where you had no film halls. Film halls are not only about entertainment, it's about accommodating liberal forms of expression. How do you change that?
One must remember, in the rest of the country, one must remember.
It's like you travel from Srinagar to Ladakh, one will understand what the word liberal is, So everything changes. You'll have Israeli tourists, there's so many other places in terms of food, eating habits, there is a fundamental change in the way people would move around in Ladakh than they would do in Srinagar, even today when there's a lot of tourism.
Right. I mean, right now there is a lot of tourism. You won't get hotel rooms in not just Srinagar, not even Pahalgaon, not even in Gulmarg. It is bustling with a lot of tourist activity. That is what Kashmir used to be always. We had a phase of terrorism for 2-3 decades in between. See, one thing we must all remember, that the kind of politics that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have seen in last 70 years, no other Indian state has seen it. They had seen the politics of the partition time. They were the ones, several of them were also involved in fighting against the intruders, invaders from Pakistan. They lost their people. They decided to join Indian Union. There was a phase when Sheikh Saab hobnobbed with Pakistan. But subsequently, they had 20 years of Delhi-centric rule by chief ministers like Sadiq and all. They had seen, the Sheikh Accord, again Sheikh Saab returning. They had seen the rise of separatism. They had seen the rise of terrorism. They had seen the restoration of democracy in 2000s. There was one family rule until 2000s. Suddenly they had seen two-party rule, like PDP emerging as a force. See, the amount of politics that Jammu and Kashmir as a state has seen, people of the state has seen, experienced over decades, nobody else has experienced. So, if today you see different shades of political opinion in the state, just don't blame the people alone. People, of course, express different shades, but there is different kinds of leadership that has emerged in the states over decades. So that has created a very complex polity in Jammu and Kashmir. We need to tackle it step by step. Now, first major hurdle was 370. That has gone. So this basic question that we are exceptional, we are separate, that has gone. But the other issues there. Over this period, as you rightly said, exploitative forces like Islamists have taken ground in some pockets. You need to deal with that. But best way to deal with those situations is, again, give the power back to their hands. Let them run it. To those people who are committed to your constitution, who are committed to the present status as an integral part of India, let them rule, let them handle these challenges. Are you trying to suggest that such challenges don't exist in other parts of the country? Don't we have serious challenges like Maoism in Chhattisgarh? Do we rule from Delhi? Chhattisgarh rules them. Chhattisgarh taxes them. They die, they sacrifice, they fight. We support them. So, such a situation should come back in Jammu and Kashmir also. For that, the first step taken was to remove the special status, so-called special status. There was never any special status. Rest of the things will fall in line slowly.
And last two questions. One, how seriously, the developments in Afghanistan has a great overbearing on the South Asian subcontinent. Ghani Garbit has been completely surrounded. Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, Lashkargah, Kandahar, they are being attacked successively. How do you see that ramification on the residual part of J&K?
It's a hypothetical question, honestly speaking, but definitely the situation in Afghanistan is alarming. The progress that Taliban forces are making must alarm every right-thinking person and every person who wants peace in the region. If the Taliban succeeds in capturing Kabul by force, or for that matter, the so-called agreement that the US has brokered, if that leads to Taliban becoming an equal stakeholder in Kabul's government, in either scenario, there is bound to be a challenge for India, because Taliban's rise in Afghanistan means an upper hand for Pakistan. I know in India there are experts. You can find variety of experts in India who will deny this argument, and they will even say that rise of Taliban is a challenge to Pakistan. I have come across such arguments also. But someone who has studied it from a particular perspective, I strongly believe that rise of Taliban is definitely not a good news for India. Now, how much impact it will have on Kashmir is a question which we all have to seriously ponder over. When I say the strategic community and security establishment have to ponder over, one good thing is, in Kashmir, we have been able to take lot of strong measures to contain any major threat from Pakistan's side. Today, they are not able to push the terrorists into our territory. They are not able to push drugs and weapons in a big way, although they are using drones in some places. So we are able to largely control manage the affairs along the border. That becomes crucial. What happens once Taliban succeeds in, if it succeeds, we don't know if it succeeds in capturing Kabul.
And my last question, people generally say if you are part of Parivar, you always remain a part of Parivar. So are you full-fledgedly back for the work of Parivar, or you are still thinking of doing something for an organization which you officially crossed the line some years ago and then created history by forming governments in Assam and J&K?
Yeah, right now I'm back in the RSS as its member of the Central Committee.
Thank you for speaking to us. So this was Ram Madhav, very candidly sharing his opinion and saying that the politics of exceptionalism was killed, or to say taken to task by the revocation of Article 370, and it has done great good to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So thank you very much for making time. So this was all in my special program, On Point with Kartikeya.